Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Dokken Album Ranking. So the band itself, they formed in 1979 and they take their place as one of the 80s bands who helped define the glam metal era sound. And over their 42-year career, they've had a number of famous musicians come through the ranks. So join me as we count down their 11 studio albums. But before we get started, if you are new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, by subscribing, as an added bonus, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with Dokken Album Ranking. So we've got 11 albums to count down, and coming in at number 11 is Shadow Life from 1997. Sixth studio album by the band at the time. This one here was following on from the reunion album Dysfunctional. But this one here marked a shift in the band's sound and style, moving them further away from what we knew them from in the 80s into an alternative rock sound, carrying on from the grunge sound of the early 90s. So the sound itself was darker and more modern sounding on here, and it really alienated their fan base. In my opinion, there's little to do on here that sounds any way in shape or form like Dokken from the 80s itself. You know, looking back now, I find the album to be a bit of a curiosity, but at the time it was actually quite a disappointment. Okay, coming in at number 10, Hell to Pay from 2004, ninth studio album from the band. This one here was the first one to feature guitarist, or new guitarist I should say, John Levin. And while he doesn't really shine here yet, he certainly will on later releases. We're going to talk about how great he is later on. But this one here, the band was still under the guise and the notion that they could reinvent themselves. This one here's got a darker, more modern sound to it still. Unfortunately, most of the songs on here aren't very memorable in my opinion, and the album fades from memory pretty quick on here. Still though, there are some standout tracks, in particular the first two songs, The Last Goodbye and Don't Bring Me Down, which actually has quite a furious nature to it, much like Tooth and Nail. So real interesting song there, but as I said, the album just kind of fades pretty quickly after that. Okay, coming in at number 9, Dysfunctional from 1995, fifth studio album at the time, and it was a reunion album for them. First album since the 80s heyday. And while this album here should have been a reason to celebrate, I think the album, the band too, fell prey to the trappings of the early 90s, the slower, more moodier, darker playing that was going on at the time. And it didn't capitalize on George Lynch's guitar playing sounds. Now, one of the reasons I think that may be the case here is that the album itself originally started as a Don Dokken solo album that was later reworked into the reunion album as things developed and changed. Consequently though, there is very little of George Lynch's sound on the album except during guitar solos and things. And unfortunately, I think that really hurt their chances to bring back the old fans, but it also hurt their chances to excite any new fans and bring them in that way. Still, there are some flashes of brilliance on this album. I really like the lead single that came from it, Too High to Fly. Coming in at number 8, we've got Erase the Slate from 1999, seventh studio album, and first to feature new guitarist Reb Beach, who of course comes from Winger and would go on to play with White Snake. And while the pairing sounds like a great idea, I think it did little to benefit Dokken. I don't think it quite worked very well for them. Reb's sound and style is so completely different than Dokken's sound on here. But I do love the album for Reb's playing on it. It's just that the album itself doesn't sound like a Dokken album. And overall itself, the album, I think, would have been better as if the band had changed their name to something else or whatever. It's a great album. It's got a lot of high points as a great rock album. Case in point, the second track on here, Change the World, and the title track where I think Reb really shines. But as a Dokken album, it just doesn't sound like one to me. Maybe I'm too close to the Winger sound where Reb comes from, but that's how I feel about this particular album. Coming in at number 7, Long Way Home from 2002, 8th studio album. First to feature new bassist Barry Sparks, who comes from MSG, and new guitarist John Norum, coming from Europe. So cool lineup here, new additions in all. John previously played with Don Dokken on his solo album, Up From the Ashes, which is absolutely fantastic. If you've never checked out the solo album, it's great. It's a lost Dokken sounding album, even though it's done as a solo release. There were, for me at least, were really high hopes that the chemistry between John Norum and Don Dokken would reignite here and we'd get a return to form album in that sort of guise. But the album itself is, again, one of the more dark, more modern sounding takes that they were doing towards the tail end of the 90s and into the early 2000s. Each time Dokken has changed guitarist, it's really changed a key element of the band's sound, and I think it's hurt their identity as a whole, doing this so many times throughout. You still have Don, and you still have his sound and his writing style, but the guitar is such a key element. You get these great players in, but it just changes the overall sound of the band. All right, coming in at number 6, Broken Bones from 2012, 11th studio album. This one here was building on the classic Return to Form album from 2008 that was called Lightning Strikes Again. The album itself and the aforementioned album, Lightning Strikes Again, really lets John Levin shine finally. So building on where he started from, where I don't think he was quite yet allowed to shine, these albums finally are doing it. For me, it's one of the closest representations to their original days. You know, the album itself starts off really, really high and strong with Empire and Best of Me, and it continues for the next few tracks in here, but unfortunately it begins to taper off midway through, but still strong enough to bring it in at number 6. Coming in at number 5, Breaking the Chains, 1981, debut studio album from the band, only album to feature bassist Juan Croucier, who would go on to Rat. Contains the absolute classic title track that's on here, which for me stands head and shoulders above everything else that's on here. The other songs on here are good, but just don't have the same power as that title track. And for me, a lot of the songs, the album songs that are on here, tend to sound dated now. They just aren't recorded and produced to that same level as the title track on here. So the whole album itself doesn't have that level. If it did have that level, it would rank much higher in my countdown. Coming in at number 4, might be a surprise to people, but for me at least, Lightning Strikes Again, 2008, 10th studio album, totally worthy of this position here. A classic return to form album, both in sound and style. One I never thought we would get from the band, featuring the amazing guitar work of John Levin on here. This is the one, the pinnacle album for him that he really rises to the occasion on. The playing on here is every bit as good as the classic era Dokken. Opening track, Standing on the Outside, sets the tone for the whole album here. You know, it's blistering from start to finish. It doesn't let up. The whole album itself is great, and for me, easily comparable to the classic era albums with all of its great deep cuts and everything on it, which for me at least is why it's placing at number 4. Coming in at number 3, Tooth and Nail from 1984, second studio album. First to feature new bassist Jeff Pilson at the time, of course, becoming a classic member, and he goes on to play with Dio and Foreigner. So that you can see a lot of amazing people came through the ranks of this band itself. For me, the band finally finds its sound on this album here. Both the songwriting and production are considerably better than the debut. From the blistering opening of the title track, Tooth and Nail, to melodic classics that are on here, like Just Got Lucky, Into the Fire, Alone Again. Just lots and lots of great hits that are on here, but the album cuts that are on here don't quite hold my interest to the same degree as some of these other albums, causing this one here to place at number 3. Coming in at number 2, Under Lock and Key from 1985, third studio album from these guys. So here, everything really finally comes together for the band. The sound, the production, the quality, the consistency of the album includes the stellar opening track, Unchain the Night, followed by 2 more classics that are on here, The Hunter and In My Dreams. And it also features the outstanding track, It's Not Love. But the album cuts that are on here are just as good. Track number 5, interestingly, Lightning Strikes Again, is the track that album number 10 takes its name from. So when they were trying to make that return to form album, they actually chose a song title to do that. In all, making for a solid album from start to finish, and one of the most consistent listens in the band's catalog. All right, and coming in at number 1, Back for the Attack, 1987, fourth studio album from these guys. Quintessential album, in my opinion, building on everything that was from Under Lock and Key. Again, the sound, the production, the quality, the consistency. They deliver on all of that here and more. It's the best sounding album in their catalog. Again, this is my opinion. It was produced by Neil Kernon, who had produced albums for Kansas, Queensryche, among others. He just found a way to really capture the best of Dokken, their depth and power as a band. Features the songs Kiss of Death, Prisoner, Burning Like a Flame. The album also features the song Dream Warriors, which came from the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, which I think is one of their best tracks on here. Then you've got some really great deep cuts, Night by Night, Heaven Sent, and Mr. Scary, the George Lynch instrumental, one of the tracks that really defines who he is. All for me, of which ranks this album and brings it in at number 1. All right, so there you go. That is Dokken album ranking. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Do check the description for links to related videos. And certainly if you enjoyed this, please share it out on social media. Help spread the word that way. All right, guys, leave your comments. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye, everyone.